You see the clerk. Item number 8, House Bill 2329 by Representative Pearson.
One of y'all got to say. You got to switch it up. There you go.
All right, you're recognized.
Thank you. Got 3 motions. First. Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, before you is House Bill 2329, the Repeal Permitless Carry Act. This bill would just strike the line out of Section 39-17, 1313A, which says, quote, or who lawfully carries a handgun pursuant to Section 39-17-1307G. This bill, in effect, reinstates the permitting requirement to conceal and carry a handgun in public spaces, regulating possession, transportation, and storage. Look, gun violence is the #1 killer of children in the state of Tennessee. We have to treat it as the epidemic it is, and as legislators and people of good conscience, we must do everything that we possibly can to address this crisis. Look, when this bill was passed, a lot of people in District 86 in Memphis and Shelby County and across the state were opposed to it, including our chief of police. And I know how much we respect the opinion of law enforcement up here. The concern was that this would lead to an increase in violent crimes with guns. Another concern was that it would prevent law enforcement from being able to decipher between law-abiding citizens and those who only intended to do us harm. Concerns were raised that there would be an increase in homicides due to the violent offenses that would occur by people having access to weapons in our state. And each and every one of these concerns, unfortunately, has become a part of our reality in the state of Tennessee, most especially in Memphis and Shelby County. The actions taken by this General Assembly and legislature have had dire consequences for people whom we love and whom we care about. And so today I'm asking only that we right a wrong. I think about Larry Thorne. I think about Dr. Yvonne Nelson, Reverend Dr. Arturo Easton Williams, who were all killed tragically in our city and were killed by folks who did not need a permit to carry their weapons. Just a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned Pastor Livingston, you all know, on the House floor. And his grandson said this. He was shot in the mouth. He is surviving his wounds. He's from Southwest Memphis. His grandson said, honestly, I'm sick and tired of losing people to gun violence. I've lost 7 friends due to gun violence, and I'm nothing but 17. It's time to stop the violence. It's time to stop the robbing, stop the killing. It's time to put the guns down. When this body repealed permit requirement to conceal and carry a handgun in most public spaces, since then, gun deaths in our state have risen. I've spoken to law enforcement officers. Again, our own police chief has pleaded for us not to pass this law. And surprising to all of you, I'm going to quote John Harris, who leads the Tennessee Firearms Association, who I never thought in my life I would agree with about anything. And he said, if you want to carry a gun for self-defense in Tennessee, go get the permit. Do not rely on this new law. Over 59% of Tennesseans do not approve of having access to a firearm without a permit. And in our city, where over 398 people were killed last year, overwhelming majority of them due to gun violence, it just shows that this uptick is a problem that does need a solution. The research goes on to say permitless carry laws make law enforcement's job harder and more dangerous. Honestly, in our city, and you all saw the news about this, an individual shot one of our police officers. God bless. They are recovering from their injuries as well during a traffic stop. We are not making it safe for our community. We're not even making it safe for our law enforcement officers. And so while I appreciate the intent of this legislation, right, you want folks to be able to have access to their firearms, reduce barriers as it relates to people's belief in the infallibility of the Second Amendment, we have to also recognize the increase of the amount of guns that are in our street and the increase of violence that we have seen. And so to allow for people to be able to carry concealed without a license, without any training, without any documentation, I mean, you don't even have to go to a class. I think it really is putting us in a dangerous position. I'll just tell you this last thing. I went to Top Gun Memphis, and Oceanay and I, and the instructor there, Mr. Lloyd, a great guy, the first thing he told us, he said, we need to make sure that people have a permit to carry a weapon. Now, we're in a place where everybody is at the range already, and he has more firearms than I have, anything. And his advice was that everyone in there, every instructor, everybody he talked to, everyone we spoke with, would want to ensure that people would at least, if you were going to be a responsible gun owner, that you would have a permit. So you learn about safe storage, you learn about protecting kids so that they don't get access to these things. This is our responsibility when over 1,500 people a year are dying in our state. And so for these reasons, I do ask that you support a repeal of this legislation so that we are not the number one. Gun violence is not the number one killer of children in our state. We're 36% higher than the national average, over 60 children killed due to homicide each year. These are not things that we can take lightly. I'm open to amendments. I'm open to a real summers. I'm open to everything because I want us to do everything possible to change the direction that we are currently going. And so with that explanation, Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion and stand ready for any questions you might have.
Boy, you hit that 5 minutes right on the mark.
I practice.
You have. Chairman Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just making sure that your bill is a complete repeal of the constitutional carry we passed a couple of years ago.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Chairman, the reality is, and I know this is near and dear to a lot of people's heart, but I think when you look at the ramifications of legislation, you have to say, what is it that we can do to fix the problem? And the reality is this likely went too far in one direction. And it has led to really unfortunate consequences in our community in Shelby County and Memphis, but across our state. And I think if we are to do this, there have to be some more incremental steps that could have been taken or should be taken moving forward. But we do not need to make it so that anybody can go, and you can go and purchase a weapon today, whether that be a handgun, an assault weapon, or any of those types of things, without even having to have a permit. And if it's not a permit, right, if you don't want to reinstitute permit, at minimum take a course or a class. Again, I'm not doing any advertisements for Top Gun Memphis, but like go take a class, right, and learn about how to actually operate a firearm safely so that we can potentially reduce some of the deaths in our communities. Literally, we had on the House floor, and I believe this passed, to require children to take a class learning about firearms, but we don't require a class for parents or for adults, right? It's just, we know that there's a need for more education, and this prevents people from even having to take a class or get any more information about actually how to safely store, how to safely carry the weapon or firearm that they have.
I agree with you on the class part. I think it's a great thing, a great idea if folks get trained. What's your answer when the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed, and you're saying that before you can exercise the Second Amendment right, that's very, very fundamental, you have to have a class before you can exercise that, particularly in light of the Bruin ruling out of the Supreme Court recently?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of the Second Amendment at the time that, right, it was written, and depending on if you're originalist or someone who turns it or does other things with it, it really had to do with the building up of a militia in the state. But our Constitution also, right, written after the Second Amendment, says that you can regulate and you should regulate firearms for the public safety. That's in our Tennessee state constitution, because I think the framers and the founders of this institution, just like the ones as complicated as they were who founded this country, did not assume that people would be able to get access to weapons to do such harm to our communities and in our communities. I don't think they were saying, let's have a Second Amendment so that gun violence becomes the #1 killer of children in our country. I don't think that was their intended consequence, definitely an unintended one that has happened. And while I don't want to infringe upon anybody's rights, anyone's Second Amendment, anyone's constitutional amendments, I think what we also recognize is that our responsibility is to the people who elect us. Our responsibility is to the children who cannot vote, but who we are responsible for, who right now are dying overwhelmingly due to gun violence. And so it's not to take away anyone's access to getting firearms, and repealing permitless carry wouldn't take it away, right? This was the law for a long time. It's not taking away anybody's firearms. It's saying that if you're going to be in Tennessee, if you're going to have a firearm, at minimum, we're going to know that you know exactly how to use it, how to be safe with it, and in doing so, we're going to help prevent some really unfortunate loss of lives in our communities. Thank you for that, Chairman.
All right. Thank you all. Hate to cut the party short, but we are out of time.